Imagine your heart stops. For a moment, you are clinically dead, yet you see everything: bright light, a tunnel, loved ones long gone. Doctors revive you, but you return with a story science can't explain. Tonight, we peel back the veil on near-death experiences no doctor can debunk. Chapter 1. The moment between life and death. When a human heart stops, a quiet clock begins to tick. Doctors call this moment clinical death. The body looks still, but inside, cells fight for seconds of life. Blood stops carrying oxygen. Brainwaves fade like a distant radio signal. For most people, that should be the end of all thought. Yet a small group of survivors tell a different story. They describe scenes, sounds, and details that happened while they were officially dead, sometimes while machines recorded no brain activity at all. These reports have challenged scientists for decades. Tonight, we'll walk through the doorway between life and death and ask, how can memories form when the brain is offline? Let's start with what we know. When the heart stops, the brain can survive without oxygen for about 4 to 6 minutes. After that, neurons begin to die quickly. Within 10 minutes, most electrical activity is gone. Doctors call this the flatline, a silence on the EEG monitor. Standard medicine says consciousness should be impossible at this stage, but many near-death experiences, often called NDEs, don't fit that timeline. Survivors describe floating above hospital beds, watching doctors work, or hearing conversations they could not possibly have heard. In study after study, some details match real events. Specific tools, exact phrases spoken by medical staff, even the order of procedures. One case often cited is that of Pam Reynolds, an American woman who underwent a rare brain surgery in the 1990s. To reach an aneurysm, doctors cooled her body, drained her blood, and stopped her heartbeat. By every medical measure, she was dead. Yet later she described surgical instruments, conversations, and music playing in the operating room. Information confirmed by the team present. Scientists have debated this case for years because it occurred when her brain activity was carefully monitored and nearly absent. Researchers have tried to explain NDEs with science. Some propose that a lack of oxygen triggers vivid hallucinations. Others suggest a flood of chemicals like DMT might create dreamlike visions. These ideas sound reasonable, but they leave gaps. Oxygen deprivation usually causes confusion, not detailed, clear memories. Chemical surges might explain colorful images, but not accurate reports of real-time events. In hospitals across the world, doctors have recorded similar accounts. Patients describe moving through a tunnel of light, meeting loved ones who have died, or feeling overwhelming peace. The pattern is strikingly consistent across cultures and ages. Whether the person is Christian, Buddhist, atheist, or a child too young to know religious stories, many describe the same core experiences. This consistency forces researchers to look deeper. Could the brain be more resilient than we think? Some scientists now study tiny bursts of hidden activity that might survive after the heart stops. Recent animal studies show brief waves of brain energy moments after death. Perhaps consciousness hangs on in ways we don't yet measure. But even this cannot fully explain how people observe events outside their bodies. Imagine a patient floating above an operating table, describing a shoe on a hospital roof or a nurse's missing ring. Investigators have checked many of these claims. Some are vague, but others are precise enough to surprise skeptical doctors. These stories do not prove life after death, but they raise questions no one has solved. Think about the human need to understand what happens after we die. Every culture has a story. The Egyptian journey through the underworld, the Tibetan bardo, Christian visions of heaven and hell. Near-death experiences may be modern echoes of those ancient tales, or perhaps those tales came from early NDEs, long before hospitals existed. The science of dying is still young. Modern resuscitation has only been possible for a few decades. Each year technology pushes the border further. Cooling the body, advanced CPR, and rapid defibrillation mean more people return from the edge and bring their stories back with them. As we listen to these accounts, we must hold two ideas at once. First, the brain is powerful and still mysterious. Hallucinations can be vivid and meaningful. Second, some details in NDE reports remain hard to dismiss. The truth may lie somewhere between biology and something we do not yet understand. In this series, we will follow that trail. We'll hear more stories, examine careful studies, and weigh theories that stretch from neurology to quantum physics. For now, remember this. In that fragile moment when the heart stops, when monitors fall silent, some people find not darkness, but a strange kind of awareness. Chapter 2. Patterns of the other side when people describe a near-death experience. The details are often startlingly similar even when the stories come from different decades, cultures, or faiths. The moment their heart stops, a strange sequence unfolds like scenes from the same hidden film reel. These recurring moments are so consistent that researchers now call them core motifs. The first motif is the tunnel of light. Survivors talk about being pulled through a narrow passage or a dark corridor toward a brilliant glow. The light is rarely harsh. Most say it feels warm and alive, a kind of gentle invitation. One man who collapsed during a marathon said, "It wasn't like any light on Earth, soft, but brighter than the sun, and I felt drawn in, not afraid." Whether the person grew up in Tokyo or Toronto, that glowing tunnel appears again and again. The second motif is the out-of-body experience. People describe floating above their own body, looking down on doctors and nurses racing to save them. They remember small details, the pattern on the floor, the sound of a specific machine, even the way a doctor's glasses slipped down his nose. These details can later match reality. A woman in France recounted how she watched a nurse drop a metal tray in another corner of the room, something confirmed by staff who thought she was fully unconscious. Then there are the encounters. Many report meeting deceased relatives, close friends, or what they call beings of light. These figures often communicate without words. The message is simple but powerful. It's not your time, you must go back. A Canadian man who suffered a cardiac arrest explained, "My grandmother stood there, younger than I ever knew her. She smiled, and I felt everything I'd ever worried about dissolve." Another common element is the life review. Survivors say they relive key moments, not like watching a movie, but feeling the emotions of everyone involved, joys and regrets alike. It's described as instant yet detailed, a flood of memory that somehow fits into seconds. A school teacher from India shared, "I saw the look on my father's face the day I left home, and I felt his sadness as if it were my own." This powerful replay often changes how people live afterward. What makes these patterns so intriguing is their global consistency. You might expect a Christian to see angels or a Buddhist to see a bodhisattva, but many accounts share the same core events regardless of belief. In Japan, patients describe the tunnel of light using the same words as survivors in South America. Indigenous traditions in North America have long told of a spirit road, or path of light, that sounds remarkably similar. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of a passage through darkness into a radiant field. It's as if people from every culture are glimpsing the same landscape with different names. Modern researchers have collected thousands of these reports. The International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS, maintains a database with cases from over 60 countries. Patterns repeat with uncanny precision. The tunnel, the floating perspective, the loving presence, the life review. Language and religion may color the imagery, but the sequence remains. Psychologists and neurologists naturally look for a physical explanation. The most common theory is oxygen deprivation. When the brain lacks oxygen, vision can narrow, creating a tunnel effect. Electrical surges might trigger bright lights and strange sounds. It's a neat answer, except that many patients had normal oxygen levels or were on full medical support when their experiences occurred, and oxygen loss usually causes confusion or agitation, not the crystal clear memories survivors describe. Another idea is a sudden release of DMT, a powerful hallucinogen the brain can produce in small amounts. DMT trips can feel spiritual and intense, so some suggest a massive surge at death creates the classic NDE. But lab studies show DMT visions vary widely and rarely produce accurate, detailed observations of real events happening in another room. Other proposals include temporal lobe seizures, REM intrusion dreams, or a final surge of brain activity as cells die. Each theory explains a slice of the phenomenon but not the whole picture. They can easily account for verified observations, like describing hidden objects or recounting precise conversations during a flatline. This is where the storytelling turns chilling. Consider the case of a hospital patient in the UK who, while clinically dead, later reported seeing a red shoe on the roof of the hospital. A staff member climbed up and found it exactly where described. Or the child in Thailand who nearly drowned and later spoke of meeting a sibling his parents had lost years before, a sibling he had never been told about. These accounts remain anecdotal, but when collected in the hundreds, they create a pattern science struggles to dismiss. To be clear, researchers do not claim these experiences prove life after death. Most emphasize that anecdote is not evidence of a soul, but they admit the consistency is remarkable. Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician and leader of the AWARE studies, notes that patients often describe events that should be impossible to perceive with a non-functioning brain. Why does that matter? Because it challenges the idea that consciousness is only a product of neurons firing. If the mind can record memories when the brain is offline, we may have to rethink what consciousness is and where it resides. Survivors often speak of deep transformation after returning. They lose their fear of death, grow more compassionate, or shift careers to focus on helping others. One man put it simply, "I came back different. It wasn't a dream. It was more real than this room." Whether or not the experience points to an afterlife, it leaves a permanent mark. These stories have another effect. They remind us how little we know about the frontier between life and death. In the first chapter, we looked at the moment the body shuts down. Now we see that many people, in that silent gap, experience a vivid journey that science cannot fully chart. As we move forward, we dig into the next layer. The researchers who are testing these mysteries with controlled experiments, they place hidden images in operating rooms, measure brain waves in the seconds after cardiac arrest, and search for evidence that consciousness might outlive the body. The data they collect is unsettling, and it forces even the most rational scientists to keep asking questions. For now, remember the shared motifs: the light, the tunnel, the floating view, the loved ones waiting, the sweeping life review. Across cultures and centuries, these echoes ring the same. They suggest that whatever happens when we die, it may follow a pattern far older and deeper than any one religion or theory. Chapter 3. Science on the Edge. The personal stories you've heard so far are compelling, but science demands more than testimony. Doctors and researchers want verifiable evidence, something that can be tested, measured, and checked. Over the past 2 decades, a handful of studies have tried to do exactly that. What they've found is both fascinating and unsettling. The most famous effort is called AWARE, short for Awareness During Resuscitation. Led by Dr. Sam Parnia, this study set out to examine what happens to consciousness during cardiac arrest. From 2008 to 2014, researchers worked with hospitals in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Austria. Their method was straightforward but clever. While emergency teams treated cardiac arrest patients, hidden targets pictures or words were placed in rooms where only someone looking down from above could see them. If a patient reported an out-of-body experience and described a hidden image, that would be hard to explain with simple brain chemistry. The team monitored over 2,000 patients who suffered cardiac arrest. Of those, about 330 survived long enough to be interviewed. Roughly 140 reported some sense of awareness during the time they were clinically dead. That's about 1 in 10, a significant number when you consider that their hearts had completely stopped. Among those, a smaller group described vivid perceptions, floating above the body, seeing medical staff, or hearing conversations. Only one patient in the initial AWARE phase accurately described both sounds and visual details during a 3-minute period when his brain showed no measurable activity. He later recalled specific events in the room, including the rhythm of a machine that was beeping at the time. While this might sound like a single data point, it's striking because it occurred during a period when blood flow to the brain was absent. Other projects have followed. AWARE 2, an expanded version, added more hospitals and improved brainwave monitoring. Early reports suggest similar results. a small but consistent group of patients, describes lucid experiences even when brain scans show little or no activity. The data is still being analyzed, but preliminary numbers again hint at consciousness persisting beyond the heartbeat. These findings challenge a simple brain-only explanation. If the mind is purely a product of neurons firing, how do we account for accurate memories formed when the brain is offline? Critics argue that brief bursts of activity too small or too fast to capture might still create perceptions. Yet the precision of some memories is difficult to dismiss. Take the hidden image tests. In several hospitals, researchers placed pictures on shelves high above patient beds, visible only from near the ceiling. Patients were unaware of these tests. Out of hundreds of interviews, a handful reported floating sensations, and one described the exact image of blue sunburst without ever physically seeing it. Skeptics point out that numbers are still low, but even a single match raises questions. Other experiments added sound cues. In some rooms, a laptop played random words or tones at intervals during cardiac arrest. A few patients later repeated fragments of those sounds, despite being medically unconscious. Again, the sample size is small, but the results create tension between what we think we know about the brain and what these patients recall. Let's step back and look at the numbers more broadly. Across major studies, about 10 to 15% of people who are successfully resuscitated report some form of awareness. Around 2 to 5% give detailed accounts of seeing or hearing events during that period. These percentages may seem low, but they represent hundreds of individuals whose hearts stopped and who should have been incapable of forming memories. Some skeptics argue these memories could form in the seconds before or after cardiac arrest. When the brain still has residual activity, perhaps patients confabulate mixing real events they sensed just before unconsciousness with imagined details. Others point to the possibility of microbursts of brain energy at death, recently observed in animal studies. These explanations are reasonable, but they don't fully resolve the cases where timing was carefully documented. Consider a chilling example from the Aware files. A 57-year-old man collapsed in a hospital corridor and was pronounced clinically dead for several minutes. After recovery, he accurately recounted the actions of the medical team, including a nurse's remark about his dentures and the appearance of a defibrillator cart. Records confirmed that these events happened while his heart was stopped and EEG activity was absent. Another well-known case, outside Aware but carefully documented, involved a patient describing a specific shoe on a third-floor ledge of the hospital, a detail later verified by a staff member. Individually, such cases could be coincidence or misremembered. Together, they form a pattern that statistical probability struggles to explain. The scientific community remains divided. Peer-reviewed journals have published these studies, but many neurologists remain cautious. They point out that small sample sizes and the challenge of perfect timestamping make absolute proof difficult. And of course, one confirmed case doesn't rewrite all of neuroscience, yet the evidence refuses to disappear. What makes this so eerie is that data itself feels haunted. It's clean, clinical, and collected under strict protocols, yet it suggests something beyond the physical. The numbers are cold, but they whisper of consciousness surviving a silent brain. It's as if the spreadsheets are hinting at a presence science can't measure. Researchers continue to refine their methods. Some now combine real-time EEG with near-infrared spectroscopy to track the brain second by second. Others design more sophisticated hidden targets, even projecting moving images upward that only an overhead observer could describe. They hope larger datasets will either confirm or finally disprove the phenomenon. Meanwhile, patients keep adding new stories. In Canada, a man who flatlined after a car accident described floating above the crash site, watching firefighters cut through the wreck. In Japan, a woman recounted the exact conversation between surgeons while her heart was stopped. Each account adds weight to the question: if consciousness can persist in these gaps, what is it really? For viewers, the takeaway isn't that science has proven life after death. Far from it. The studies remain careful, skeptical, and methodical, but they showed that something measurable happens during those silent minutes. Awareness may not depend entirely on a beating heart, As you listen to these results, you may feel a quiet unease. The data sits in medical journals, peer-reviewed and plotted in charts. Yet behind the statistics are people who say they traveled beyond the body and returned. Science hasn't confirmed the afterlife, but it has documented experiences that refuse to be ignored. In the next chapter, we'll explore those who crossed even further patients, whose stories blend ancient spiritual visions with modern medicine, blurring the line between cultural myth and lived event. For now, remember this: the numbers themselves carry a shadow. They tell us that when the heart stops and the monitor falls silent, consciousness may not immediately follow. Chapter 4. Crossing the threshold. When people describe a near-death experience, they often struggle to find words big enough for what they saw. They reach for music, color, and emotion, saying, "It felt more real than life itself." In this chapter, we step into those descriptions, stories that bridge science and myth, the operating room and the afterlife. Each account carries a strange harmony with ancient spiritual texts, as if the oldest stories and the newest research are whispering the same message. A surgeon's journey beyond. Dr. Laura Mendel, a respected cardiac surgeon, lived a life of measured science. She trusted data, not dreams. But during a routine surgery to remove a benign tumor, a sudden hemorrhage led to complete cardiac arrest. Monitors flatlined. For over 6 minutes, the surgical team fought to bring her back. When she awoke, Laura's first words stunned her colleagues. "I was in a place made of music and light." She recalled drifting upward, leaving her body on the operating table. Above her stretched a world of shifting color, violet and gold, that pulsed like a living symphony. Harmonies folded into one another, not heard with ears but felt in the bones. Most striking were the details she gave of the procedure. She described an unusual clamp a nurse had dropped. She mentioned a melody someone was softly humming to steady their nerves. Every detail checked out, moments no unconscious patient should have known. When asked if she believed she had hallucinated, Laura simply said, "I've held hearts in my hands. I know what the brain does when it dies, but this was something else, something more real than the operating room." Her words unsettled even the most skeptical colleagues. For them, the experience was a riddle. A trained scientist encountering a realm that defied the limits of biology. Voices from before birth. If adults return from the brink with vivid stories, children add another layer of mystery. They sometimes speak of places and times they could never have known. Take the case of 4-year-old Evan from Nova Scotia. After a near drowning, he began to talk about a beautiful garden where he lived before Mummy. He named flowers his parents had never shown him, and mentioned a woman of light who said it was not yet his time. Another child, Maya, awoke from a brief cardiac arrest, describing a house by the sea. She accurately recounted the layout of her great-grandmother's home somewhere she had never visited, and which had been torn down decades before. These accounts echo research from Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, where hundreds of young children have described previous lives, or states of existence before birth. In many cases, details were later confirmed by records or relatives. Are these coincidences, or glimpses of something beyond the single lifetime we assume we have? Science hesitates, but the stories keep coming. Mirrors across cultures. Ancient civilizations wrestled with death and what lies beyond, leaving behind maps of the soul's journey that sound eerily familiar to modern near-death accounts. The Tibetan Bardo, the Bardo Fiddle, known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes a journey after death through dazzling lights and strange sounds. It warns the soul not to be distracted by visions and to follow the clear light toward liberation. Many NDE survivors today speak of an overwhelming bright light and a sense of choice whether to move forward or return. The Egyptian Book of the Dead. Ancient Egyptians imagined the soul traveling through trials and encountering gods who weighed the heart against a feather. Some near-death experiencers describe passing through tests or meeting beings who evaluate their lives not with judgment but with love, as if measuring the weight of their actions. Christian visions of heaven and hell. Biblical accounts often feature radiant landscapes, choirs of angels, and, at times, terrifying glimpses of darkness. Modern NDE reports include both blissful and frightening scenes, glowing fields where time stops, but also shadowed voids where fear is overwhelming. the parallels are hard to ignore. These cross-cultural echoes raise a question. Did ancient prophets and mystics record early near-death experiences, framing them with the language of their time? Or are these similarities just the way the human brain copes with death? Either answer is extraordinary. If they were describing the same phenomenon thousands of years ago, then NDEs may be a constant of human existence. If it is all the brain, then why do descriptions from Tibet, Egypt, and modern hospitals share so many intricate details? When science meets myth, skeptics argue that oxygen deprivation, neurochemical surges, or the release of natural hallucinogens like DMT can explain these visions. But this leaves gaps. Why do people across continents and centuries describe nearly identical stages, leaving the body, moving through a tunnel, meeting deceased loved ones, undergoing a life review despite vast differences in religion and culture? And how do we account for verifiable details, like Dr. Mendel's observations of a dropped clamp, or children recalling homes they never visited? If these are simply dying neurons firing random images, why are they so organized, so coherent, and so similar? Neuroscientists admit that while some elements of NDEs can be partially explained by brain activity, the full pattern remains a puzzle. The phenomenon sits in a borderland where science and spirituality overlap, each side peering into the other's territory with curiosity and caution. The threshold question, perhaps the most haunting idea, is that near-death experiences might not be unique to those who almost die. They might be a preview of what every one of us will face. If the Tibetan bardo, the Egyptian duat, and the Christian heaven are all cultural frames for the same underlying reality, then NDEs are not anomalies, they are clues. Ancient texts may be early field notes from people who crossed the threshold and returned to tell us. Imagine that death is not an end but a transfer, a shift to a realm of music, light, and review. If so, the surgeon's music and the child's garden are not fantasies. They are signposts of a journey we have yet to take. Chapter 5. Theories that refuse to die. Death is supposed to be final. Yet every time researchers map the mind's last moments, strange evidence leaks through the cracks. Ideas once dismissed as science fiction keep returning like echoes from somewhere beyond the veil. In this chapter we examine the boldest theories: consciousness as a quantum field, reality as a simulation, and death as a dimensional shift. The science is technical, but the mood is unmistakable. Something about our existence may be far stranger than we imagine. Quantum consciousness, the mind beyond matter for decades. The human brain has been treated as a machine of flesh and electricity, but a handful of physicists and anesthesiologists argue that this view is incomplete. Their proposal is the ORCOR theory, short for Orchestrated Objective Reduction, developed by Sir Roger Penrose, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and Dr. Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist. The theory suggests that consciousness does not arise from neurons alone. Instead, it might emerge from quantum processes inside microscopic structures called microtubules, tiny scaffolds, within brain cells. Quantum mechanics allows particles to exist in multiple states at once, a phenomenon called superposition. Penrose and Hameroff propose that these microtubules can hold quantum states, meaning our thoughts may rely on quantum events beyond classical physics. When a person nears death and normal brain activity stops, these quantum states could decohere, releasing conscious information into the fabric of the universe, like a signal into the air. Hameroff once explained it this way: when the heart stops, the quantum information in the microtubules isn't destroyed, it just disperses. If the patient is revived, it can return. If not, it could persist indefinitely, perhaps as the soul. Mainstream neuroscientists often push back, saying there is little direct proof that microtubules sustain quantum states long enough for thought. Yet the idea lingers. It offers a framework for why near-death experiences feel more real than real, as if the mind can exist apart from the body. Multiverse and dimensional shifts. Another theory moves beyond the quantum brain to the structure of reality itself. The multiverse. According to some interpretations of cosmology, our universe may be just one of infinite parallel universes. If every possible outcome exists somewhere, death might be less an ending than a transfer of awareness, a slide to another branch where consciousness continues. Imagine this. Your body dies in one timeline, but your awareness collapses into a version of reality where you survive. This idea, sometimes called quantum immortality, sounds like fantasy, yet it emerges from real equations in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Linked to this is the simulation hypothesis, made famous by philosopher Nick Bostrom and amplified by figures like Elon Musk. The hypothesis suggests that our universe could be an advanced computer program. In this model, death might resemble a system reboot, where the player exits one simulation and wakes in another layer of reality. Supporters point to the strange mathematical elegance of physical laws, digital-like structures at the quantum level, and the possibility that future civilizations could create hyper-realistic simulations. If so, consciousness might be code capable of uploading or shifting between servers. It sounds wild, but remember, a century ago, quantum mechanics itself seemed impossible. Today, it runs our electronics and medical imaging. What seems absurd now may be foundational tomorrow. The skeptics speak of course. Many scientists urge caution. They argue that near-death experiences and visions of other worlds can be explained by well-understood biological processes, neurological models. When the brain is deprived of oxygen, it releases a cascade of chemicals that can produce vivid hallucinations. Areas responsible for vision and memory may misfire, creating tunnels of light. Life reviews and encounters with loved ones. Chemical surges. The dying brain releases neurotransmitters and endorphins, causing euphoria or vivid dreams. Some researchers suggest a flood of natural DMT, a powerful hallucinogen, could produce the intense imagery described by survivors. Psychological factors. Moments of extreme stress can create dissociation where a person feels detached from their body. This might explain reports of floating above an operating table or observing one's own resuscitation. These explanations are logical, yet they leave blind spots. How do we account for verifiable perceptions when the brain is clinically inactive? Patients describing hidden images placed above hospital beds or recounting details they couldn't have seen? And why are the core motifs bright light, meeting deceased relatives, life reviews, so consistent across cultures, religions, and centuries? Skeptics acknowledge these puzzles, but often label them coincidences or memory reconstruction. Still, the evidence refuses to vanish. The thin boundary. As you listen to these theories, notice the pattern. Science keeps circling the same mystery. Quantum mechanics reveals that reality is non-local and deeply connected. Cosmology hints at infinite worlds. Computer science shows we can simulate complex realities. Neuroscience, for all its progress, cannot pinpoint a single location in the brain where consciousness lives. What if consciousness is not produced by the brain but filtered through it, like a radio picking up a broadcast? When the radio breaks, the signal continues elsewhere. Near-death experiences could be moments when that signal slips free, giving a fleeting glimpse of the greater network. Picture the final moments of awareness as a slow dissolve. The heartbeat fades, neurons quiet, and yet, a sparkle at quantum information. Call it code drifts into a wider field. Whether that field is the multiverse, a grand simulation, or something our language cannot capture, it suggests that death might be more of a threshold than an ending. Invitation to wonder. None of these theories are proven. Each carries flaws and unanswered questions, but they endure because the experiences that inspire them are too consistent, too vivid, to ignore. The surgeon who floated in a realm of music, the child who recalled a home that no longer existed, the thousands of ordinary people who woke from the edge of death, certain that something, call it mind, soul, or awareness, goes on. Perhaps that is the quiet message inside every theory, that the boundary between life and whatever comes next is thinner than we think. As we move to the final chapter, keep that idea close. The data may be incomplete, but the mystery is alive, waiting for the moment we each cross the threshold ourselves. Chapter 6. What it means for the living. The stories of near-death experiences are more than tales of tunnels and light. They ripple outward, shaping how people think, act, and love once they return. In this final chapter, we explore how these encounters change lives, challenge philosophy, and force each of us to ask what death and life really mean. Psychological impact, lives rewritten. People who survive a near-death experience often come back changed in ways that surprise even their closest friends. Clinical studies from hospitals in Europe and North America show common patterns. Loss of fear of death. Survivors frequently say they no longer dread their final moment. Many describe death as a peaceful release or a return to something familiar. This shift can be dramatic. People once anxious about aging or illness begin to face life's end with calm acceptance, stronger sense of purpose. After an NDE, individuals often feel driven to live more meaningfully. They change careers, mend broken relationships, or devote themselves to service. A businessman might leave high finance to teach. A soldier might dedicate his life to humanitarian aid. The specifics vary, but the urgency to live authentically is striking. Heightened empathy. Many report a deep connection to others and to nature. They speak of feeling energy in every living thing, a sense that all life is woven together. This can lead to profound compassion, even toward people they once disliked or feared. Spiritual awakening. Regardless of religious background, survivors frequently describe a stronger spiritual orientation. Some return to traditional faith. Others embrace a personal, non-dogmatic spirituality focused on love and unity. These psychological changes are not fleeting. Long-term studies show they often persist for decades, suggesting that whatever happens in those moments near death, it imprints the mind in a lasting way. Lessons for everyday life. If near-death experiences point to something beyond the physical, what does that mean for how we live now? Several themes emerge. Presence over possessions. Many survivors say the life review they experienced, seeing every action and feeling its impact on others, made material success feel trivial. What mattered was kindness, honesty, and the small ways they touched other lives. Courage to change. Facing mortality can clarify priorities. People report quitting jobs that drain them, repairing estranged relationships, or finally pursuing long-held dreams. The fear that keeps most of us from big change often fades when someone has already faced the ultimate unknown. Service and compassion. Those who felt overwhelming love or unity during an NDE often come back determined to share it. They volunteer, mentor, or create art and music that express the peace they glimpsed. For those of us who haven't crossed that threshold, these insights are powerful reminders. We do not need to nearly die to live fully. The call is to act now, while we have time. Philosophical reflection. Does consciousness survive? The idea that awareness might continue beyond the body shakes the foundations of modern thought. If consciousness is more than brain chemistry, several implications follow. Identity may be larger than the self. If our minds are part of a wider field, the boundaries between individuals could be more porous than we think. What we do to others, we ultimately do to ourselves. Time may not be absolute. Many NDE survivors describe timelessness, moments when past, present, and future merged. If consciousness exists outside the physical brain, our usual clock-based reality might be only a slice of a greater continuum. Death may be a transition, not an end. Philosophers from Plato to contemporary thinkers have wrestled with this possibility. If the mind is not confined to the body, then death is more like moving from one room to another than a full stop. These reflections do not demand a single belief system. Instead, they invite us to consider that life's meaning may not be measured only by years or achievements, but by the quality of awareness we cultivate. The final chill. After centuries of study and countless personal accounts, we are left with a question that cuts deeper than science alone can answer. Perhaps the question isn't if there's life after death, but whether death was ever real at all. Think of a wave rising from the ocean. It forms, moves, and eventually collapses back into the sea. Did the wave truly end, or did it simply return to where it began? Many NDE survivors describe their journey in similar terms: a return to a vast consciousness that feels like home. Living with the mystery. Not everyone will believe these stories. Skeptics point to biology. Believers point to spirit. The truth may live somewhere between. What is certain is that contemplating these experiences changes how we see the present moment. Instead of fearing the inevitable, we can focus on how we love, how we help, and how we use the time given. Whether death is a door or a wall, Living well today remains the surest path to meaning. Now it's your turn to reflect. What do you believe waits beyond the last heartbeat? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this journey into the unknown gripped you, consider liking and subscribing for more dark truths. Together, we can keep exploring the mysteries that blur the line between life and whatever comes next.